Шановні пані та панове, ми готові розпочинати. Просимо займати ваші місця у залі. Шановні гості, просимо займати свої місця. Ми готові розпочинати наступну дискусійну платформу. Просимо проявити повагу до спікерів. Дякуємо. Шановні гості, просимо займати ваші місця. За мить ми розпочинаємо засідання 8-ї дискусійної платформи. Після того на нас з вами чекає перерва на каву. Шановні гості, за хвилину ми розпочинаємо засідання 8-ї дискусійної.
Dear guests, in a minute we start discussing with the eighth discussion platform, gender equality as a factor to reach sustainable peace. Our speakers are ready. Please take your seats.
Розпочинаємо засідання 8-ї дискусійної платформи «Забезпечення гендерної рівності як запоруки досягнення сталого»
as a factor to reach sustainable peace. The moderator to the discussion platform, Maria Ionova, Member of Parliament of Ukraine, Political Party European Solidarity, the co-chair of the Equal Opportunities Caucus. Please welcome the speakers. Andriy Zavgorodnyuk, Minister of Defense of Ukraine. Oksana Kolyada, Minister for Veteran Affairs, Temporarily Occupied Territories and Internally Displaced Persons of Ukraine. Ivana Klimpush-Tsentsadze, Member of the Parliament, European Solidarity Fraction, Chair of the Committee on European Integration. Mariana Bezugla, Member of Parliament of Ukraine, Servant of the People Fraction, Deputy Head to the Committee of National Security, Defense and Intelligence. Martin Brooker, former Naval Commander, Royal Australian Navy. Serena Scott, Lieutenant Commander, UK Armed Forces. Ivona Kostina, Chair of the Board of Veteran Hub. Ms. Ionova, now you have the floor. Dear friends, dear colleagues, dear people who share the same views, this is an extremely important topic which we continue to discuss for the third year in a row, and I am happy that this is happening and the third Ukrainian Women's Congress is taking place, and we have success, we have results, we have a lot of questions we should decide and solve, but still at this top level we are raising those questions. We have this high representation, so there is an understanding for these problems, there is a political will to move on, to fight and to respond to those challenges that we face mutually, jointly implement those things which we are facing. The state sector at the level of ministries, this is government, society, international experience, legislation, and of course inevitable part is a civil society, and I'm glad to welcome all of you here. I would like to say that today we have such high representation. It means that there is a political will and it is necessary for moving forward, not only to respond to those problems that exist, but trying to prevent those problems from existence, prevent those challenges that we face. I would like to say that today one of the discussions, there was the quotation that impossible is nothing that you have a political will. So Ukraine has to create secured conditions of equal and actual and meaningful women participation in peacemaking processes, sustainable peace process and preventive activity at all of the stages. When we say, for the second day in a row, when we speak about quantity, but we also need to pay attention that within of the security and defense, we should not only speak about quantity, but we should command about equal access to decision making, again quoting the economic discussion, the room when it all happens. I would like to say that every speaker would like to point out, to highlight other equal opportunities where there is really the room where it happens and we are women there in this room, and how to fight those barriers and obstacles for participation. We speak about Russian aggression, we speak about military aggression, and we also say that it is a huge influence for groups of women and men, and both for the civil citizens. And I would like to say that our speakers, every speaker, each in its speech, how practically those principles of women, peace and security are implemented, because next year we are going to celebrate 20 years since the adoption of the Council of Security 1325 resolution, and as Clara Hutchinson mentioned, three basic principles of NATO was working with women, peace and security: integration, gender component, inclusive component, when the participation of women and to decision making, and of course the responsibility for keeping to your obligations. Mr. Minister, I have the first question to you. What are the plans for integration of this gender component into the military reform? Because there are a lot of discussions and revisions for security and defense sector. Are you going to include this component too? Good afternoon, everyone. Of course, it should be included. And now we speak about so-called marital review. In 2018, we adopted the law which made women equal to men in terms of their jobs that they take and the positions that they take. So there are no positions that women cannot take now, because we had this situation in army, and now we have just a few posts which women cannot take, which we are going to, I think, remove this year or by the end of this year, or probably the next year. Just for principle, I think we are going to get rid of them, and if to make it equal, so it should be equal in all of the respects. But the question is now, as you know, one of the biggest representation of women in military forces, 10% of military women who are in service, and in general the whole systems covers 10% of civil personnel and 10% of military, but these are the numbers. As for the policies, not too much actually is included into the policy sector, but every act should pass through the gender expertise, though there is a program, annually program with NATO, and it was the most active one in terms of gender balance this year. There were more than 20 events. Next year, 25 events. Next year the number will increase. I just spoke to Vinnikov and the NATO representatives in Ukraine. So our task is to close this question next year, so it shouldn't be on behalf of the state. What about medical provision? Okay, let's separate one from another, because medical provision, everybody shares equal rights. The problem is infrastructure availability, and this problem, I think, it is planned for medical provision within the part of the budget for the next year, to have the same thing, facilities in hospitals, so both men and women can use the same type of health services, and there is no discrimination about this. But the infrastructure for women in military services, of course, is not ready till the very end, and this is the biggest problem that we face now. I think as for medical provision, we're going to talk to Mariana for a little bit more, but I would like to go back to gender component in the national strategic program. What are the main events and tasks in 2020 in comparison with 2018, when this program started operating? And it has a lot of positive feedback because it is a joint mission for Ukraine and NATO. 25 events in 2019. So what are you planning for 2020? The question is that this annual program with NATO, it's kind of, covers just the tops, First of all, it should close one big gap from the point of view of Ukrainian policy on gender equality next year. All of the questions should be closed. Totally equal access, totally equal rights, and it should be done in legislation, but by all of the acts which will be adopted by the Ministry of the State from the point of view of military. And I think this is a basic decision that now we are working together with NATO, because this annual program is still in process of creating, but the red thread of this program, I think, should be to get rid of those questions from the political point of view. Of course, when we do the implementation, the infrastructure, they assess, I think it will take time. We cannot build the infrastructure very quickly, but from the point of view of the program, from the budgeting point of view, it should be finished. From the program point of view, it should be finished. And as for the infrastructure, we should have very distinctive roadmap. I would also like to touch the system of education, because a very step ahead for integrating girls to the military education system it was the removing of prohibition for girls to enter to military academies as cadets. But what are the other obstacles, in your opinion? Are we keeping this equality in access to education? So, for example, the Lyceum of Ivan Bohun, I've been there. I've been also to the Navy Lyceum. If there are some limitations, let's talk about this now. But you spoke about the quality on the military service. 27,000 of women, but only 3,000 they are actually officers. They are in the command apparatus. So we adopted this legislation about sergeant and positions and officers' position according to NATO standards will be a kind of breakthrough for women who would like to be in military career, but at the generation of that, we spoke together with girls within Generation Z platform that men, we spoke about stereotypes, and in terms of military and security, it's a huge stereotype in men's mind that from the very beginning, if a woman wants to do some extreme sports or go climbing mountains, the man is sure that she is going to break the leg. I would like to ask for your opinion. Do you believe that whatever woman does, she is always breaking her legs? No, not necessarily. Okay, so I do really hope. Okay, let me expand. Yeah, short answer to short question. Our policy is quite simple. We should remove any kind of obstacle. Of course, the mental part is the most complicated one. The mentality is even more complicated. The infrastructure, the capacity building, and of course, the NATO program contains the communicating part. This is spreading information on gender equality. It's a burning issue. A lot of men, especially those who are older generation, they still have this, kind of special treatment that this is not woman's job and so on and so forth. But the state's policy, there is no such thing as non-woman job. You cannot actually say this, and we should expand the number of men in the commanding. So I have one vice minister who is a woman. There will be a next one soon. It will be one more position for my deputy, and it will be a woman for sure. But our main task is nobody's going to ask me such a question whether it is for man or for woman. It wouldn't make any difference, because in many organizations, in many leading posts, we don't actually pay attention to which gender is represented. Who's the best candidate? Who has the best capacity, the best competence? He or she takes the position. It's not the question. In combating, in action, when we speak about physical pressure, of course, this question comes every single time. But we know a lot of women who can actually do this, a lot of physical workload. And if they have such a desire, we actually cannot prevent them from doing this. Thank you very much. And it means that next 4th Ukrainian Women Congress, we will have first Ukrainian woman general, because our military minister now is a feminist. I would like to continue. We are very welcome to see here Miss Serena Scott. He is the Lieutenant Commander of the Royal Navy from UK Armed Forces, and this is a great example. This is a role model for our country. And of course, I would like to ask you, because the NATO policy on gender equality is renewed last year, and the typical feature that it is spoken about full meeting of all of the obligations. How can we do this? How possible is that? And how this mechanism for regulating for facts of sexual harassment in military forces work in your country? Probably you have some pieces of advice to us.
Dobrý den. I will continue in English. That is the sum total of my Ukrainian. Thank you very much that I could come and speak here. Where we are with the British military, we are similar to the Ukrainian in that there is only 10% of the Navy is female. I have served frontline both as a warfare officer, so driving ships and flying helicopters, but I've moved into the training sphere because that is where it is easier to be a mother and have children as well. So that is the other side of it. Your question on harassment and how it works with that, yes, I have had personal experience of the senior officers not believing that a woman should be in your position. And I think there are the 3 points of have confidence in yourself as a female. You should have the training to get you on in the military. And communicate. Tell people what's happening. And I think the more that we get out there, the opinions of others, and we work on that, then the opinions change. And over my 15-year career, opinions have changed, and it is much easier, and I think there are a lot more senior officers who support females in the military, and we are doing much more for that. I can't say we have very many at the top. We have one female Commodore in the Royal Navy and no admirals, and there's currently one 3-star Air Marshal in the Royal Air Force, but otherwise we are rather Spartan on our senior females. I hope that answers.
Дякую вам за
Thank you for sharing with us with your personal experience. But what about the legislation? Do you have any mechanisms in your legislation system regarding counterparting of the sexual harassment based on the legislations? That's a counterparting of the sexual harassment based on the...
There's no legislation for sexual harassment. It is just we have the training. There is training on diversity and inclusion, and it's not just women who get harassed. There are the women who make it higher up have a tendency to bully the boys too. So it works as diversity and inclusion for everyone, whatever, whether you're female, male, or whatever your orientation is. So the military has allowed women at sea for 30 years now. We've had women in submarines for 10 years. And last year, the last barrier for the Royal Navy was the Royal Marines. So we have women going through the training there as well now. But there's no legislation on harassment. It is pretty much up to people to stand up for themselves and to follow the training for everyone on diversity and inclusion.
Дякую. Я хотіла би перейти більше, може, до...
Well, I would like to start to ask you about the successful stories. What about your personal experiences? For the last 5 years, well, we got a lot of women in our military forces, and especially in our special forces, we had a lot of volunteers, and you know, that's the strong of power, spirit of power. It's very important. So the fight is a kind of encouraging things for our women in military forces. What is your personal story? Have you ever dreamt to join the military in UK, or what is the inspirational moments in your life?
Wow, that's some question. Inspirational moments. So I mentioned there has been times where senior officers have gone beyond where they should have done. Thankfully, it was dealt with the time, but inspirational points, it's pretty amazing when your office is above the clouds. So flying a Merlin helicopter on active duty on operations was amazing, and I think any girl can try it. Well, bit of training in between, but it's important.
Що ви чули про
And what have you heard about Ukraine? How do you see Ukraine within these hybrid war conditions and direct military aggression from Russia? How UK armed forces, do you observe what is happening in Ukraine? Because here we have a lot of different trainings, pieces of advice, special operations. And you, what was the first time when you first heard about Ukraine and you wanted to share your experience with us and tell your story to us?
I've heard a lot about Ukraine because the British services have a lot of cooperation over here, which I think is very positive. My individual department is sending people over here to help plan training and support Ukraine. Hearing about this conference, I got about a week's notice. The British Navy is very good at just saying, right, your name's top of the list, go do it. So, no, I didn't have much preparation time for here. But I've had a fantastic 24 hours. I've been over to the Lyceum and met the girls, 15, 16-year-old girls, who were inspirational, certainly in their questioning, very, very positive, and you've got some super role models in the staff and people supporting them to bring them forward, which I think is very, very positive.
Дякую. В зв'язку з тим, що вас так
So thank you that you don't have many also bureaucratic obstacles to visit our Congress. We invite you to join us one more time here in Ukraine for you to share your story for those military educational academies. Because for our girls who just start their military career, it would be extremely important to serve as a role model and to be the inspiration and say that yes, I can. And I also would like to go back to the legislative provision and to speak to Mariana, who is the deputy head of the Committee on National Security, Defense and Intelligence. And I would like to say that you are representing the sector of military and defense. You already know it from the inside because you have an experience of working in the Project Bureau of Military Defense Reform. You run the program for developing this medical provision of military forces reform. What do you see? What are the first things on our list for gender integration into this reform? And do you believe that we have to raise the question on sexual harassment in Ukrainian armed forces and trying to find the solution to the question at the legislative level? Thank you. Greetings to everyone. Glad to be here, and actually this is the first my event in my whole life, kind of paradox, and it's kind of, you know, logical meeting to trying to answer your question as for the trend. I would like to first of all make some general remarks. So talking about gender balance, of course it's a developmental question for the whole society, but if we separate on a separate cluster, we actually promote some gender inequality on our behalf. So being, for example, on pink platform, what's that? Is it acceptance of the female style as a developmental part? No, it's not pink, sorry, it's violet, it's purple, it's official color for our Congress. Okay, purple, yeah? Let me continue. Is it a stereotype? So should we accept this stereotype as a part of our culture? and practically we are extrapolating them on the general public, or we are separating ourselves as our interior female culture. So it's kind of complicated, you see, to speak about these things as sexual harassment, sexual violence, medical provision. It's totally different. Medical provision, it's a technical component. Basically, to form the resources, to find the tools, and to find the powers to give sustainable medical provision to all of the categories who serve in military forces. We are coming toward this, and the better medical provision system is, the better care it takes of all of the needs for everyone who is in military service, who protects your country, and at the same time protecting by serving in the battlefield, in the office, but whether this equal access to medical service provided for female military people, because even Mr. Minister accepted that there is a gap in the defense and military sector. Yes, you've started solving this. What's the basic stage? As I remember, Mr. Minister spoke about positive gap, that there is military forces, they are kind of ahead of this process in general for the country. Yeah, we are ahead. Yeah, we are ahead, far ahead in comparison with other part for security sector. Yeah, it's a fact. It's a fact. So even NATO says that it is true. You can ask them. Okay, you are going to share this. Of course, we have a lot of things to do, but still more and more opportunities. We have to get very nice medical provision. And the problem with medical provision for female, they actually synchronize to the common problem. So if there is not enough potential for some resources, for some medications, or for some special medical specialists, or there is a perspective that some medical specialists, they got fired from the medical forces. So it is also contributes to the problem to female health service as a kind of medical problem. I see the positive dynamics, of course, taking into account that personally I changed my job, yeah, in a way, because before I dealt with military medicine, and there is a conflict of interest when I would say that many things were done by me and improved, but still, actually, we did a sum of joint medical service as a one single body, and being making it easier in legislation to manage, and it's obviously had some positive influence to medical provision also for female military people. And of course, this dynamic still goes on. This is, I think, more the question to the Ministry of Defense.
As for this sexual harassment and sexual violence and sexual harassment is the criminal thing. So, well, it's one of the crime cases. So, well, we have to determine as the criminal case, and also we have to counterpart with this criminal case as the other criminal violences and criminal cases. So, well, it should be a responsibility and it should be a punishment. And the other moments, the culturology, that's a kind of an issue of culture, ethics, and link between men and women. So, well, I prefer to have this bilateral approach. Bilateral approach, it's something what we have to deal with. Well, we have to deal with the culture. For example, if you're a sergeant, an officer, for example, man and woman, what is the culture behind? And so we do have lots of problem from the side of women too. And I would like to say that it's true. For example, why I'm just telling about it, that's about the rosy color. Well, with the rosy color, it should be a kind of a things on the way to our natural culture. The natural colors for the specific teams like military forces. Military forces is a very specific area. We have to improve this, let's say, color. I love that you enjoy this rosy color of our Congress. It's great. So, but let's talk about sexual harassment. We're not talking about only women, and we understand these negative stories from both sides, men and women. We're just talking about the human rights, and we need to solve this problem. And we do have this preventional mechanism to prevent. And the idea was ask you as a member of the committee, because we're for the second day talking about the different policies on the different levels, and all the speakers, they approved the importance of the gender expertise to have, and every legislation components and every gender components should be a part of the legislation component, legislative approach. So do you think that's important to have this gender content? Would you support, would you fight for this gender content? And what do you think? The gender, to fight for gender, it's okay. It's like to fight against corruption. We're ready, absolutely, but we're working on it. But the legislation also should be a kind of a basement, and the legislation should really bring us to the equal opportunities, and we have to face the decrease in the different dangers. So, we ask Mr. Minister of Defense of Ukraine, what about you? What about your ways? How to find the cooperation? How to deal with the committee? We have the nice partnership with committee. We've been working with Mariana. I know her since 2015. So, well, our gentlemen from the committee, they've been in the army for the certain period of time. They understand what's going on. So, well, I've been to the committee meeting, and I say that this is two different committees, the previous and now the current committee and the previous. Our committee's members right now, they are more practical, more simple, and they are not even talking about the corruptive things. We always think about the involvement of the national manufacturers. We are just talking a lot about the legislation contents, etc. What about the gender content? So for 3.5 months being there, so I didn't hear about this. Well, we have the specific way. We have to go through this gender expertise, but unfortunately, I want to say a little bit different things. So we can walk around, but the idea is we do not exactly know how many cases of violation in our military system. What about statistics? I don't know. I guess we have no idea how many violations we faced, generally speaking. So I'm sorry to tell you with the different things. I think it's not of this gender. I think there is a lack of mechanisms to support the rights of the military people. So we have this so serious and very repressive so-called specific power forces like police, NABU, etc. So well, and this military person, open, transparent, and they can, start the, audit anytime. They could arrest the military person anytime. So, well, but there is a lack of support and protection. So we're on the way. We just try to find a solution. And the idea is the lack of this support and protection leads to the situation when nobody's are asking for it. Nobody's are, telling about this and about harassment or whatever. So we do not know exactly the percentage of people, military people, those who suffer from this. I have no idea how to, we're talking about that. We hope that at least they will pay attention on this very issue. So if we will pay attention, yes, even not only women, but the men also will talk about this. The problem is that the men also talking about the, a violation of their rights, but they are not talking about the human rights, but the military rights.
So, out of revenge, for example, if you try to complain on the senior officers, on your personal commander, so then I think it will be kind of very, very threatening to him, because it's kind of hand regime. Now we take those cases and we solve those cases, because when we're going to construct the system, we're going to lose. They are going either to want to just to leave the military service, or they will be lowered in the rank. For example, this extremely important military people to us. If someone is following us on Facebook, there were cases with military people who were actually planning with some serious things in 2014, 2016, and now we are saving them from, from violation of their rights. What's my point in that? Basically, at this time, now we are solving this question as a so-called manual regime. It's bad, but it's better than nothing. I have a counselor, a volunteer. We have like part of my office actually are women volunteering, and gender parity was like 60%, yeah, the women gender. And the last still women volunteers, one of these ladies is Alona Verbitska. You know this person. So she deals with protecting military human rights. And please, just to put it in a very practical way, please tell everyone, all the ladies, military service, if her rights is violated, there is a person who can deal with this case and who can help her with it. So, but this problem should be included into the communication strategy of your ministry, isn't it? We are trying to do this, but you know that at this point, basically what I'm saying, this is a part of the communication strategy. At any platform where I speak about the violation of human rights for military people. I speak about those councils. There is also the general inspection, and like the general inspector who is going to deal with he was from the military service, he was at Donetsk airport, and I think we will help to change the system of internal control, but it will take time. It may take a year, it may take even more. So if you know about the violation of the rights of military people, especially female, so call to my office. You will get the mobile phone of Miss Alona Verbitska. She is dealing with every single case until it is finished. Thank you very much. And now I would like to address to Martin, to Mr. Brooker. So it's your second time in our Congress, and you see how the situation changed over a year. I know that you are an expert in leadership and strategy, and you've heard the executive body, the legislative body of our international friends, and in your opinion, those leadership strategies and their implementation of this gender balance, implementation in sector of military and defense, what are the best strategies in times of hybrid war?
So I guess the first thing I'd like to say is it's nice to be back again in Kyiv. It's nice to be back and to see that the conversation is moving on from where it was last year. In terms of leadership strategies, organisations actually need to do a couple of things. One is they need to have moments of truth where we actually hold a mirror up to ourselves and go, you know what, actually we haven't got it right. Our organisation comes from a long history of being a very masculine-dominated environment, and it's now shifting because people have held a mirror up to it and go, what you're doing here is actually not working. So going to the issues of sexual harassment and the like, we've actually had to really dig deep and actually go, that's not okay behaviour and we need to shift it. Those moments of truth also come with regards to gender equality in the workplace, and also the implementation of gender equality in our forces. So we, a couple of years ago, made the decision to open up all combat roles to both genders. That was, at the end of the day, a clear decision by the Chief of the Defence Force and the Minister to say we're going to remove all the barriers to that and allow that to proceed. At the end of the day, that was about capability, noting that if we're going to achieve true capability, if we're going to achieve diversity of thought, if we're going to achieve all that we want from capability, then all of those roles need to be opened up to both genders. We've seen deliberate decisions in terms of leadership to say, okay, so the target for next year is 21% representation, for example, in the Navy, but what would stop us from going to 25% in 1 year? What can we do about that? What can we do to shift our recruiting policies? What can we do to increase the inflow of officers and sailors through our training institutions? And I think the other comment I'd make in terms of leadership strategies that we actually need to normalise the fact that a mixed gender is part of our organisation, and we need to have that courage to do that in whatever way that we need to. This is about shifting commitments that people have made in the past, and the Minister talked about mindset. It's all well and good to have legislation, but you've got to shift the mindset. The mindset comes from when leaders set the example, when leaders actually stand up and say, you know what, this is actually not working, we need to do better. And I'm pleased to say I've seen that occur at the higher levels in our defence organisation, where we now have female representation or women representation on the higher level committees in the defence organisation. They are asked for their opinion about the gender aspects of a particular decision. We also have a number of senior military officers who are now serving in operational roles. The commander of the UN mission in Crete is an Australian female Major General. We now have a number of them in our organisation and also across the services. So at the end of the day, there is those perspectives need to come out in all of our decision making, and we need to be, the men particularly, need to be not satisfied that we've actually done enough. We actually need to be told when it's not working. We need to open ourselves up to being vulnerable and be able to hear the truth about what's going on.
Дякую.
Thank you, and you also will know that you are the ambassador of the White Ribbon. You are the commander of the Australian Royal Navy. You are doing the advocacy. So what are responsibilities included into your mission, and how do you do the promotion, and what pieces of advice can you give? How can we involve more men to support this movement?
Well, I think my own personal moment of truth was as a father of 3 daughters, realising that they were exposed to certain circumstances in male-dominated environments, not in the military. Yeah, he for she as well. When it comes to White Ribbon, I guess that campaign about stopping violence, but for me it's bigger than just the violence. It's all forms of harassment. It's all forms of where there is power misused in gender. And we really have had to work hard, and you need people to stand up and not be a bystander to that behaviour. And I can think back to being a very junior officer in the Navy 40 years ago, and there were probably circumstances there where I was a bystander, and I regret that. I feel guilty that I watched behaviour that was not appropriate occur. Now it would not happen that way. For me personally, of course, but what I know is of young men and women in our organisation, they are stepping up and calling out bad behaviour when it occurs. They're not waiting for it or they're not letting it just go through to the goalkeeper, so to speak.
Дякую.
Thank you very much. This is your second time to Ukraine. And how many men have you tried to convince and to win and to share with them to be the advocates for equality?
In English.
I think I understood the question right. I think it's something I think you talk about a lot. You know, at the end of the day, unless you talk about it, and what I am seeing in Australia right now is a surge of interest in men talking about these issues because they don't want to be silent anymore. So that's a positive sign. And I spent my time now advocating for that. My legacy, though, is actually to the next generation. I'm a father, but I'm also a grandfather of a 3-year-old boy, and my wish is for him to grow up in a society where it's equal opportunities, equal rights, and that he doesn't even notice the difference.
Ми другий день говоримо.
For the second day, we speak about family, professional and personal life, and all of this talking is among women. How do you think? What about this family and work-life balance? Can we make it more actual for?
Yeah, I think achieving family and work-life balance is it takes everybody to make that work. It takes the organisation. You've got to have the right policies in place, but it also takes a decision, I guess, in terms of between couples and families, and certainly there's strong evidence of that in Australia, where women have had that career and they found that balance. I know of married service couples who have alternated overseas deployment on military operations and managed their families in between all that. That's having that couple almost spend 2 years apart from each other, yet focused on that family as well and keeping that together. So I think it can be done. I think there are some good examples, and maybe we'll bring them over here next year to share those stories.
Дякую, дякую. Будемо чекати.
Thank you very much, and I would like to switch to the question with Oksana Kolyada, who is the Minister of Veterans Affairs, Temporarily Occupied Territories and Internally Displaced Persons of Ukraine. I believe that this is the most complex and the hardest job within the government of Ukraine, because this is a ministry which is the youngest, which was done by the emergence of 2 departments. And I would like to ask you, how do you see this complex integration of the gender balance and equal opportunities in the activity of your ministry? Because when we talk about the veterans, is it more about men? When we speak about internally displaced people, these are more women and children. So how to find and keep the balance and respond to all of the challenges that each category faces?
Запрошення, ви знаєте, я поки слухаю.
Thank you so much for your questions, and thank you for inviting me. So, well, I think that in our ministry, the deputy minister is a man, so well, and he is in charge for this equality, gender equality things. We have about 50 to 50 men to women in our ministry. And then I decided that in my cabinet, I will, put the pictures of men and women on the walls. And I saw the 3 pictures of veterans women and 3 pictures of veteran men. So, well, Lena Belskaya, who is the commander of the 72th Brigade number 72, Sasha Besmertna. So she got So, well, that's the very special, cool people. They're so cool as my men on these pictures. And I'll tell you about the moments when we were fighting together for having more women on the Ministry of Defense. So we increased for 100 positions more for it. So, and then later when I started to deal with veterans, so we came to the conclusion that in reality we have to understand that the consolidation of the veterans, ladies, women veterans, is important for Ukraine. So while the presence of veterans in parliament is also important, so well, we have the veterans movement in Ukraine. So they are dealing with the very special activity to support their rights as veterans. So they are dealing with a very serious project works too. We do know about the Invisible Battalion project. You've seen the specific movies about our women veterans, and you've seen this was Ambassador, a wonderful project of ladies veterans were traveling around the world, sharing the real situation in Ukraine, and they are telling about the aggression from the side of the Russian Federation. Another project from our veterans, that's a kind of a charity activities from them. So as a minister, I understand that this is also my task to find even fundings for that programs. But we're just trying to realize all these projects together. So, and we are very actively involving both as the men veterans and women veterans. So for us to form the policies for veterans, very important, because we have to take into consideration all the demands from both of them. And so, well, it should be the specific services, medical services. In the United States, they have the specific departments for protection of the veterans, women's health, etc. So, well, as for the provision of medical service, it's a very serious thing. So, well, when I was in the military forces, we had some project together with Orlena Burlaka, and it was the idea to use the additional services. And I hope that in future we will talk with these projects with the other representatives of the authorities, because there are lots of risks, etc. So we have to discuss it. And as for the internally displaced people, especially women, in this case we're dealing a lot and it's about the training programs, educational programs, development of the self-potentials. They are successfully working with us in the different expert groups, and they're working with the different non-government organizations, international NGOs, etc. That's it. So, well, but what about the veterans movement? The veterans movement's very diverse, starting from Afghanistan's veterans and then the actively working in here. So also the women's veterans movement is also quite in development here. So, but in fact, they have the different financial abilities. And what do you plan how to solve this very problem, how to improve this better access for the non-government organizations to get this support? So what do you think? And I think that I faced this problem and I found that financial things, it's a different project.
So with the participation of public and veteran organizations, but there are no civil organizations which could implement those projects effectively. And now we actually deal with a lot of education program with these veteran organizations, how to train them to develop a project, to implement it in a high quality and to do the reporting part, because this year, in the beginning of this year, the State Service on the Affairs of Veterans, we actually didn't manage to spend all of that budget allocated cost for funding for such projects, just because of this fact. As I know, the program of your action plan includes, from the Cabinet of Ministry behalf, that you are going to open the National Center for Psychological Health of the Veterans, and then you will have the training center in terms of the high-quality services, how to work with the veterans, and probably you can tell a little bit in more details about your plans for this center and how to involve men veterans to this activity, because they are not that active as men. as women. So it's hard to work with veterans, with their motivation, because I always say that you can give a lot of opportunity, but just to make them stand up and do something, it's harder. And this is the question of multi-faceted approach in terms of medical provision, rehabilitation, social adaptation. And when one piece is missing from this puzzle, then it doesn't work at all. So if to speak about the Center of Protection of Mental Health, it is already in operation. It started in October, but we have initiated this facility to remove it from the Ministry of Healthcare to the Ministry of Veterans competence, because dealing with the Center of Mental Health, it will cover 3 approaches. The actually post-traumatic syndrome healing, probably, because we don't really have so many cases of post-traumatic syndrome. Most of them is just stress and due to traumatized cases. And of course, they are going to try and find the right diagnosis, to give the right diagnosis. We also would like to make, on the basis of the center, a very powerful training center, as you've mentioned, to work with all of those specialists who provide services to veterans. These are the first chain doctors, family doctors, second chain doctors when they contact to veterans, social workers, psychologists at schools who work with children, and veterans themselves who are going to work there in our hubs in every region. As for peer-to-peer principle, we have also the connection to the Trauma Israeli Coalition, who is going to help us to implement this project with the methodology, with the teaching, with the training groups for further trainings in regions. And I think this process has already started, and it's going on for a long time. There is such an idea that more of those specialists, I believe, that we have more veterans men than women, and sometimes men are not so inclined to share his problems to a woman. There is an international practice that in this sphere we should have more men who work with veterans. And how do you evaluate the situation? Are you going to consider it? Are you going to involve some international experience?
So, well, in reality, we do have a lot of men, veterans, those who have such a great desire to work actively in this sphere, and they will make the first emotional contacts and the first psychological support to other veterans. So we are going to train them within this training center. We do have enough men, those who would like to work with us. And we are preparing them for the specific tender to welcome to the public service. And we have to offer them this idea. So thank you. Mariana would like to add something. Yeah, I understand that this is out of the context, but you told us that they are so cool as men, as boys. It's a kind of what we face the same problem. We have to be not as cool as men. We're just talking about the equal accesses, but we do not segregate ourselves. There is a lack of understanding that someone is better, someone worse, etc. So we should avoid all that complexes, etc. So we do face a lot of different categories, etc. So what about the veteran organizations, etc.? As for the men veterans, women veterans, we have to accept the segregation. We have to get rid of this segregation. So, Mariana, I'm very sorry that you had no chance to join us previously, because we had this discussion a lot previously. So, and one more phrase from myself. And talking about the military forces, I want to say For me, ideally, military forces is the forces without any gender problems, because gender, it's a kind of to compare one category with another category. But we have not to compare. We have to protect. To defend our country. So, well, and now Ivan would like to say a few words, but I would like to give a word to the representative of the very active non-governmental organization, chair of the board of Veteran Hub, Ivona Kostina. So you've got a lot of experience of implementation of this type of programs. What do you think? Are they in process? Are you involved into this process? Do you have any partnership cooperations? And I would like to firstly say that we started this Veteran Hub since 2016. So the idea was to open the access for the specific services. We were talking about categories, needs, demands, etc. We were talking not about gender segregation. We were talking about veterans' needs. For 3 years, we opened that specific services for different types of veterans. So, and I want to say that, Mr. Minister of Defense, it's not enough just to have the infrastructure. The infrastructure is for those who are already not with us. But we're just talking with the veterans of the 21st century. They are using Facebook. They have many other demands, and they have more in demands regarding the psychological services, etc. So, well, it should be an adequate reflection of the demands, of the needs. We unfortunately face the so-called post-service legacy. Unfortunately, the refund and gifts, it's okay, but we have to provide the services. So, well, it's the things which is going to be changed in the public sector. A non-governmental sector is mainly consists of women. It's a new sphere. It's just, it's a new sphere established from nothing. And it's interesting for career growth, for career development, for veteran organizations. It's almost zero for men. So, well, it's better for women. It's easy to involve them for a long-term work. All the candidates to join us for a long period of time, so for a few years, there are not so many. And they have to understand how to increase the educational skills, etc. So, well, it's too complicated for us to find the men, but we're just trying to find the same things from our partners. But on the state level, it still doesn't work. And for the veterans from Canada or states, I tell you, the former military people, for them, it's absolutely natural to join the veteran organization and to start the career there. And it's a kind of advantage to have the veterans, the former military, in the organization. So, well, and the educational system to prepare the specialists on veteran issues, this educational system is not ready. So we don't have the programs for this. And we hope that we will develop these programs for future. And I think we will do this quite soon. And I think it should be the well-qualified and good cooperation between the Ministry of Veterans and then Ministry of Education, etc. It should be the specific training for military psychologists, etc. So, well, we have to know what is the transformation point. And 5 years, the training's still the same, despite of the fact that we have in our country. What about the provision of the equal opportunities? Well, it's very hard to evaluate because we had some changes in the government, but you know that we have these specific things in our country. The Institute to Transform the Experience is still not developed good. So, well, all that achievements, they are still in process. And it's still in process, but we do hope that the situation will be changed for better and the public sector will be involved quite wildly into the development of this program. As for the veterans, the main specialist star in the so-called public sphere, so, but they're ready to share with the specific experiences also. And we do have the opportunity now to discuss with the ministers more in detail your cooperation. So now I would like to ask Ivana. Ivana, I would like to ask you, as a member of the parliament, you've been to the public sector. You was a driver. Our young leaders, young generation, they say you are a multitask person. You've been with multitasks, and now you are a different person. You are the lawmaker person. You're from the authority place. What do you think? What do you think? What is the difference? And what about the gap to fill? What we have to do just to make the situation to be in balance. Thank you so much. For me, it's such a great honor to be a participant of this Women's Ukrainian Congress. And I would like to express my gratitude to this fantastic team who organized this event. Svetlana, Maria, Ira, all those who linked to this team. Yana, thank you. Those who are making a lot to have this. And second, I want to say that Mr. Minister told us about the some complications in mindset changes. So I understand that we have to set up the procedures, institutions, etc. But I understand, but to change the mentality, it's absolutely different things. But just to change the mentality, I must agree with Mr. Minister. We have to have the system, a very strong system, general system, together with the state system. It should be a kind of a communicative work. And together with this, we have and we can do some communicative work together. And we have to find a different way, maybe to avoid different stereotypes, and how not to observe the stereotypes. It's also very important things, because that stereotypes also could be from the Russian Federation as a result of hybrid war, but at least we have to have the procedures, rules, institutions, etc. So, and we have to understand that everything connected just to make the next steps of development so well. But we didn't appeal to the documental database, and we didn't talk about the country's policy. We are the only one country in the world approved the action plan for the 1325 resolution, and we approved this. And dear colleagues, you're partly in charge of this plan also. We revised this plan in the year 2018, but last year we had for that moment, the Ministry of Veterans, but we included the Ministry of the Temporary Occupied Temporaries. So you have also to be in charge, and now it's the good time for us to understand that it's good to talk about slogans, about let's join Ukraine to the new initiatives. That's a great idea, but we have some sistership resolutions approved on the level of United Nations on the, and it's a kind of amendments, and we're talking about safety now, and it also provisions of this document, and they just demand justice, and they demand the solution of the sexual violence. We have to solve this problem. This issue is not regulated yet. We have to rise it together to solve, and together with the parliamentary content, and together with the government, parliament, we have to solve this. And how we have to create the foundation as a base, the basic basic foundation, and then based on this basis, we have to set up the mechanisms of how to react. Well, we understand that there is some problems how to protect the military men and military women, but we know for sure that a few years ago we changed the legislation, and now we can raise our voice we provided, and now we have the right to raise the voice and to say your thoughts when you see the discriminations cases, etc. When you see sexual harassment, you can raise your voice and say. But the problem is that we have the lack of the so-called internal organizational mechanisms on how to protect this person who already rose the voice, who already said it, who. I know that you use the ad hoc instruments, but I'm absolutely sure that you have lots of supporters, those who would like to join you and to develop these tools, these instruments to be applied on practice. And there are lots of things we need to pay attention. Next year, we have to revise the national action plan regarding the Resolution 1325, and it's a possibility for us for 4 years. We have to work with this. We have to evaluate. We have to make the analysis of what we've done, and we have to make the monitoring results. We have to make this but the monitoring system is still in process, and the monitoring system should be also developed, and also we can show these best examples also, but we can lead this process. And I also would like to agree that we have the plan without any obstacles. No, it doesn't work because, unfortunately, we do have obstacles. I wish I lived in the country with the perfect conditions, but but it's a different world. But in reality, we have to get rid of the different obstacles. And in case if there is no obstacles, we have to observe the experience of Great Britain. We have to have the experience of Canada, Sweden, United States, those who just, dealing with the equal opportunities. And what we can say, even in that countries, they face problems. So destroying the barriers, it doesn't mean that you provide all the, successes. It's a lot of work, and we have to pay our attentions onto this hard work, and we can get the best results. But we have to do it united. And closing my speech, I wanted to say a lot. Let me close. I want to say, when I joined the parliament in the year 2014, I was against the quotas for the same gender in the political parties. I thought that I was competing with the men. I always competing with the men on the same level. I am available to do it, but I don't want to have any additional mechanisms just to enter the list of the political party. I didn't want that. But then analyzing the experience from different countries, and after the understanding of this problem here in Ukraine, I want to admit, and I want to say that for us, quotas, it's a temporary measures, it's a temporary mechanism. And this mechanisms helps us to come onto the traditional level. Maybe it's, like catalyst, you can do it faster. But within the sector of defense, you have to find the best mechanisms and to get the opportunity to have the equal men and women numbers, etc. So if we have to have this temporary instrument like quotas, why not? And we are proud, but we will do it just to provide the gender equality in Ukraine. Thank you. And I would like to mention that Mr. Andrew just talking about the manual regime, but what we're talking about, all the instruments, all the mechanisms, they should be developed and implemented. They should be implemented, and we have the commandments, and on the state level, it's important. So we have to follow them, and it should not be manually. And the situation for us, it's ideal, and politically, we have a non-coalitional government, and we have full, complete power belong to one team, and it's important to make some different legislation decisions. It's important. So every panel we were talking about the successes. We have to keep all these achievements, and we have to start this work. And you've been to the office of the reforms, and you understand how to move on. But we should not lose the speed. We have to move on. So, well, the speed is the same because we work 12 hours per day, even more. Well, the thing is that it was almost done, so legislation's almost ready. So, and we have to deal with the next issues. And we're going to deal with NATO program, and we still use it as a roadmap for us. So, well, and I think cabinet ministers and others ministers will help. So the main idea is we have to get rid of all different barriers, normative barriers. We have to get rid of it. The problem would be mentally. We have to have communications, and the problem would be how to protect the rights. And there was a kind of a specific problems. We were talking about manual regime. Manual regime means how to protect the rights. When we're talking systematically, we have to react on time on what's going on. So when we're talking now, somewhere the rights is violated. So, well, what do you think? How long you have to use for create this legislative mechanisms? We already have it. What we need to do, we already had the pilot projects in Odessa region, and it was also done with the support from Ministry of Defense. So we had a specific group to provide the free of charge specific support to the volunteers with the legal advices, etc. So, well, and it's for free. All the legal advices could be provided for the veterans for free of charge. So this project is working till the end of the year. We will see how many are asking, and then depends on the number. Then we will expand the projects and establish in the different territories. So, well, what about the other Ministry of Defense? Ministry of Defense also protecting the rights of military people. So we're just working actively, and this is the first systematic steps and changes, and we wish you successes. And now I would like to come to questions and answers. So, well, the first, thank you, dear colleagues. I think we want to listen to the safety things, and we are not here but just not about talking about panels, but we are here to listen to the contest. So what is the important things? For example, in peacekeeping or peacemaking processes, how the authorities could accept women in this contest. And Mr. Minister, you said that it's important to counterpart the stereotypes, and we have to protect our rights, women and men. And this very context, what I am worrying, and to want our military should not be celebrated for the International Women's Day. So, well, we do have some complications in the army, in the society. So, well, we should not love our military people for 24th of August and 14th of October. 24th of, that's Independence Day, and 14th of October, it's a kind of the National Military Day. So, well, we have to understand that for military, those who are fighting, for those who are defending, that's important things. How to make our military to be competitive, to get the best opportunities. And the military should have the a priori priorities for the development. Unfortunately, we don't have it. So we are losing the great potentials. And this is our fault as both authorities and executive power. I think we are just, out of this issue. I think it was just the issue. Involvement of women into the peace making process. I think it's just a quite expanded issue. So we do have the very serious competition, and it's the competition for the quality of the army content. So we just we lost a lot of people because they were firing from the military service. They didn't see any future development. They just stayed for one position for a long period of time for the same position. So, well, they didn't have any motivators. For example, they didn't get flats or whatever. So, well, their rights was not protected. So they had lots of specific problems with their commanders. So all the personal issues, they were very important, but we were trying to solve. But in practice, it was almost zero. So, well, we have the lack of the understanding of what does it mean military carrier. There was a lack of it. We were talking about the so-called carriers from one level into the other level. So it was very hard, for example, to train the commander for battalions or commander for the brigades. So if the person is talented, we're lucky. If there is okay, then okay. But it's the very complicated. It's a complex solution. But we do have this problem. Even 5 years ago, we have it, and even we faced this problem 5 years ago. The public control was also absent for that moment. What about the situation now? Now, what we are doing, we're just talking about this issue separately. We're just talking on the carrier development. We're just trying to deal with this. We are just starting with the specific program to provide flats to the military. What about peacekeeping processes? Is there are any accesses to women military for this peacekeeping processes? That's all. Well, I'm still in process. That we were dealing with vaccination. We were dealing with the counterparting corruptions. Peacekeeping missions. It's also, that peacekeeping missions, the filling with the specific principles. What we say, corruption. Honestly speaking. I mean, peacekeeping mission abroad differently. As for the Donbass, it's the it's in a specific area. So, well, we're just still in process to deal with it in the coming 1-2 days. We have the plans to develop the specific defense plan. We're also supporting our military people, our heroes. For us, it's priority number one, and ability to defend, that's important. So Minsk agreements, it's still in process to understand for us, and you understand how it goes. Gender policy, should be also a very important issue in our military forces. It's a very systematic issue. And we have these programs how to solve this problem, women in safety, NATO program, etc. So it will be developed more and more. Answering your questions, I want to say that we were fighting on the level of Cabinet of Ministers when we just were writing our programs, and we were fighting for our KPI. And we were talking about prestige of the military people. We were talking about reserved. We were talking about the students for military institutions. That's also KPI of the military ministries. Oh, well, but we were talking about KPI, but we catch this KPI, we live this KPI. Then we visited the headquarters of NATO, and we were talking there, and we were talking about the transfusional period. We were just talking about this. Ministry of Veterans especially works for the sector of Ministry of Defense. It's a kind of a sector of defense, let's say, and we're just trying to deal with our veterans, former combatants, just to let them be back to the life, and we are in improving the system of defense, and we're going to get the new law on the status of veteran and the social guarantees for them, and it's a draft law. We're working on it for a long period of time, and the Ministry of Veterans also has a lots of privileges, advantages, and we got from Mr. Minis a lot, and this law would be absolutely crucial. It will be different things. So it will be the lack of paternalistic approaches. It will be the roadmap regarding the veterans' potentials development, and so okay. So we support you quite great, and I think that the veterans movement, it's not the social thing, but it's also the part of our defense sector. The lady with the baby. So first of all, I would like to explain my thanks to panelists. I have the question to our international colleagues: what type of experience you do have regarding the, maternity leaves in your forces, and how you combine this maternity leaves, and do you have any gender budgeting in your countries, etc.? Thank you. If you have, Serena, could you tell us?
I've taken 3 lots of maternity leave from our military, and our policies are still developing. So the first lot was 8 years ago, and I took we are allowed up to a year. I found motherhood a bit hard. I went back to work, much easier. And so for later children, I did the same, but the rules are a lot better for us, and we've got some really good networks within the armed forces for women. So there's a Naval Service Women's Network who have sent me lots of information for this conference as well. So they provide lots of support to the women, so that whether it's maternity, whether it's we've got big discussions about menopause and how it affects women in the military at the moment. So there's a lot of discussion on women's issues within the military. But the maternity side is one of the best in the UK. So we get a year, 6 months on full pay, and up to a year not paid, but you still keep your job.
Thank you. Martin.
It's something similar. I have less experience of that personally. My children were 30 years ago, but certainly paternity leave for fathers taking time off as well. I have a personal situation of being the commander of a ship deployed in a way, and our program changed such that fathers that were expecting to be home for the birth of their children were not, but we made special arrangements to get them home. So I think, again, it comes down to a leadership decision to make these things happen because it's important.
Дякую. Хотіла просто скористатися і сказати, що у нас працює
I want to say that we do have the baby's room, and for this reason, you can use the baby's room, and the professional nannies, they can provide you with a specific service in the baby's room here. So.
Мене звати Оксана.
I am Oksana Potapova. You met with me with the different forums. I work for the Dialogues Theatre, and art and dialogue we can use as an instrument for specific communication with the amalgamated communities, with the internal displaced women, etc. I would like to say a comment. The comment is very special. Maybe you would like to comment. The more I work with this 1325 issue, the more I work with this, the more I understand that this also 4 pillars. I don't want to provide you this lecture, but 4 pillars also consist the specific ideas on the position of women in military, so humanitarian aid, peacekeeping, and culture of peace promotions, etc. So 3 years we're talking about this very issue, and we're talking about through the so-called the prisma of the women in military or women as veterans, etc. My proposal is for next year, let's have the panels participants as mediators, those who are dealing with the cultural reform developers, let's say. We have to have the associations of the internally displaced women organizations, those who are just asking for the specific support to get the flats, social flats, and so well, and economically these women are vulnerable, so we have to protect and support. I want to think about the culture of sustainable peace, let's say. Sustainable peace should be also state safety, personal safety, etc. So, well, and I think that we will do it together successfully. It will be the national plan, action plan, and there will be intersectoral intercommunications. It should be the communication between military forces. It should be the specific connections with other institutions and authorities. And if you have any comments, it would be great. Thank you. I want to say one thing. In a week after I joined the Ministry of Defense, I gave a call to Oksana, and we decided to work together. For us, we have no former colleagues, we have still colleagues, and we're just, taking care of our service clients, let's say, or our future clients, let's say. So we are providing all the infrastructures. We're just, supporting the Ministry of Veterans. We are sharing with the specific objects, premises for them, for their projects. And we have the specific object, let's say, premise to share with the former military imprisoned people. It's an interesting project for that activity. So as for the intersectoral or inter-authority projects, we're open, and the Cabinet of Ministers is really active and interesting. So well, that's a unique opportunity. And let me make some brief comments. When we're talking with Israeli representatives, I understand that the Israeli specialists, they just work very fully connected with different specific agencies are engaged. They opened this stress resistance centers. They just opened the training centers, and then we're just continuing to follow the best specific examples. So as we have to stop to accept the internal displaced people as the people with the suitcases. We have to react correctly. Thank you for your comment. Thank you. We will take into consideration all your proposals. And the last questions. Good afternoon. I want to say in Ukraine we have war, And that's why I want to be very, let's say, hard. I adore these women, those who are thirsty to change, those who are changing a lot. We do have a lot of volunteers, Pani Daira and others. They are coming from war without no status. They are just soldiers. And volunteers, there is no status for volunteers. And the specific attitudes toward them, it means, hey, go home, and that's it. But the attitudes should be changed. Mr. Minister, believe me, and the hostels, it's okay for them, but people should have the nice flats, but not hostels. I have the yes, we were talking about this. We are providing the flats for the former military now. You don't need to tell me about this. So, well, the hostels are very good. They are new and nice. So I have a question. Could you tell us where's the platform where you can tell us about the projects you're starting? Where the platform I can get the information about the funds? Where's the projects? You say that you have the left from that funds, but you can make the specific open sources to provide the information. We do have the platform. We have the informational platform and our informational resources. It's great if we have some leftovers, but we had Invictus Games and we spend it, very efficient. As for the flats to provide to the military, we should not think that we can provide it for free. We're just trying to use some alternative approaches. And a week ago, we took a decision about the specific programs to provide the specific programs for them. And that's the specific hypothec, and it's that's the provision of the flats. It's the priority also for our authority. And closing, I want to wish successes. I want to say that I think regarding the parliament, we will continue and we will strengthen this efforts just to continue to deal with this gender equality. We will do our best for the gender equality, definitely together with the state decisions. Thank you for participation. And
Учасникам за цікаву дискусію. Просимо спікерів залишитись на платформі для спільного фото. Шановні гості, запрошуємо вас на каву. Остання дискусійна платформа розпочнеться за 20 хвилин. Просимо пристрої для синхронного перекладу залишити на стільцях.